Dr. Sarah Chen stared at her monitor in the NASA Deep Space Monitoring Station, her coffee cup frozen halfway to her lips. The readings made no sense. 3 massive objects had just appeared at the edge of the solar system, beyond Neptune's orbit. They had simply materialized there, without any warning. "Hey, Mike," she called out to her colleague. "Can you verify these readings? I think we might have a malfunction." Mike Wheeler rolled his chair over to her station, his usual jovial expression turning serious as he looked at the data. That's not a malfunction. I'm seeing the same thing on my system." Within minutes, every major space agency on Earth was lighting up with the same discovery. The European Space Agency, Roscosmos, the Chinese Space Administration, all of them were tracking the mysterious objects. The objects were moving, and they were moving fast. Unlike anything humans had ever built, these vessels crossed the distance from Neptune to Jupiter in just hours. As they got closer, more details became clear. They were massive, each one nearly the size of Earth's moon. Their surfaces sparkled like crystal, catching and reflecting the distant sunlight in ways that defied known physics. At the International Space Station, Commander Rodriguez captured the first visual images of the vessels. The photos spread across the internet within minutes, and the world collectively held its breath. There was no more doubt. Humanity was not alone. Military bases across the globe went into high alert. Fighter jets scrambled, missile systems activated, and submarines moved into strategic positions. But deep down, everyone knew their weapons would be useless against visitors who could cross space so easily. The crystalline ships moved with impossible grace, taking up positions around Earth's orbit. They maintained a formation that military analysts noted would give them complete coverage of the planet. Despite their enormous size, they moved like dancers in a carefully choreographed performance. In his office at the Pentagon, General James Harrison watched the satellite feeds with growing concern. 30 years in the military had taught him to recognize a tactical deployment when he saw one. "This isn't a greeting party," he muttered to his staff. "This is a conquest formation." The aliens made no attempt to hide their presence or intentions. Their ships' scanning beams swept across Earth's surface repeatedly, mapping every city, every military installation, every power plant. The beams passed through solid matter as if it wasn't there, creating the most detailed scan of Earth ever made. In their initial assessment, the Empire's AI systems categorized Earth as a Level 2 civilization, barely capable of spaceflight, still dependent on chemical rockets, with no significant defensive capabilities. Their databanks, containing records of 10,000 years of successful conquests, marked Earth as an easy target. Standard protocol: issue ultimatum, accept surrender, begin integration process. What the Empire's sophisticated scanning systems failed to detect was more important than what they found. They didn't notice the quantum computing facilities hidden in underground bunkers. They missed the experimental AI systems that operated differently from their own logic-based computers. Most importantly, they failed to understand that humanity's greatest weapons weren't physical at all. As the first day of contact drew to a close, the Empire's Supreme Commander Tlax reviewed the preliminary reports. Everything indicated this would be a routine conquest, perhaps even easier than most. The primitive species called humans had already detected their presence, but had taken no significant military action. Tlax interpreted this as fear and weakness. This would prove to be the Empire's first mistake. 3 days after the ships appeared, the Empire made its first move. At exactly noon GMT, every electronic device on Earth, from smartphones to military computers, displayed the same message. The aliens had hacked into Earth's entire communications network with hardly any effort. Commander Tlax's hologram appeared worldwide, his crystalline form towering over city squares and flickering on millions of screens. His voice, automatically translated into every human language, was cold and precise. "People of Earth," the alien commander spoke, "you have been chosen to join the Galactic Empire. You have 30 standard days to surrender your sovereignty and accept our protection. Resistance is not advised. Your civilization is young, and we offer you the wisdom of 10,000 years. In the White House Situation Room, President Garcia watched the broadcast with her top advisors. They think they're being generous, she said, her voice steady despite the pressure. They don't even see this as a threat. The Empire's message continued, listing their demands. Earth would become a protectorate. All major decisions would require imperial approval, and humans would provide resources and labor for the Empire's ongoing expansion. In return, they would receive limited access to imperial technology and protection from other spacefaring races. Dr. Chen, still at her monitoring station in NASA, noticed something odd about the transmission. The way they're broadcasting. She told her superiors, it's like they're not even trying to hide their communication protocols. Either they're incredibly arrogant, or they're testing us. Finished Admiral Zhang of the Chinese Space Force, speaking on the emergency UN conference call. Seeing how we handle their technology. The Empire's scans had shown them a planet with primitive nuclear weapons, basic space stations, and no energy shields. Their AI predicted a 99.9% chance of peaceful surrender. They had done this thousands of times before with similar civilizations. But in a secret facility beneath the Rocky Mountains, Dr. James Wilson smiled as he watched the Imperial transmission. His team had already begun decoding the alien signals. Their encryption is advanced, he told the Joint Chiefs of Staff. But it's predictable. They rely too heavily on pure mathematics. They have no concept of chaos theory applied to information systems. The world governments publicly asked for time to consider the Empire's offer. Behind the scenes, Operation Echo was already in motion. Teams of hackers, psychologists, and cultural experts worked around the clock, studying every detail of the Imperial transmission. Sarah Chen, now reassigned to a classified project, made another crucial discovery. Their AI thinks in straight lines, she explained to her team. It's incredibly powerful, but it can't handle human creativity. It literally cannot compute why humans sometimes choose options that appear irrational. As the first week of the ultimatum drew to a close, the Empire observed Earth's apparent confusion and disarray with satisfaction. Arguments broke out in the UN. Protests filled the streets. Social media exploded with conspiracy theories. Tulax's reports to the Imperial Center described exactly what they expected to see, a primitive civilization struggling to accept its inevitable fate. But in secure facilities around the world, humanity was preparing a response unlike anything the Empire had encountered in its 10,000 years of conquest. The protests and arguments were real, but they served a deeper purpose, showing the Empire exactly what they expected to see. Let them think we're primitive, General Harrison told his international counterparts in a secure conference call. Let them think we're desperate and divided. They don't understand yet. Humanity's greatest weapon has always been our ability to let our enemies underestimate us. Deep in their crystalline ships, the Empire's AIs continued to calculate a 99.9% chance of success, unaware that their basic assumptions about human nature were fatally flawed. The ice storms of Antarctica howled outside as Dr. Elena Martinez rode the elevator down into humanity's best-kept secret. The facility, officially labeled as a climate research station, descended 2 miles beneath the ice. As the elevator dropped deeper, she thought about how the Empire's scans had completely missed this place. "Welcome to Project Legacy," said Colonel Wei as she stepped out. The Chinese officer had been stationed here for 5 years, part of the international team protecting humanity's greatest discovery. He led her through security checkpoints to a massive chamber that had been carved out of the bedrock. In the center of the chamber sat what appeared to be a crashed spacecraft. Unlike the crystalline ships currently orbiting Earth, this one was dark and organic-looking, like a massive black sea creature. It had crashed here 50 years ago, carrying a single survivor who had died warning humanity about the Empire. "Everything we learned from this ship," Colonel Wei explained. "We kept off any digital network. everything written on paper, stored in analog formats. That's why their scans couldn't find it. Dr. Martinez approached the ship with a mix of awe and determination. She had been chosen for this project because she was one of Earth's leading experts in quantum computing. "Show me what you've learned," she said. The next few hours were a crash course in Imperial technology. The crashed ship had belonged to a species that had tried to resist the Empire and failed. But they had discovered weaknesses in Imperial systems, weaknesses they hadn't had time to exploit before their defeat. "Their entire network runs on quantum encryption," explained Dr. Zhang, the facility's lead scientist. "Unbreakable by normal standards. But look at this." He pointed to a series of equations carved into metal plates. They never considered that quantum systems could be influenced by human consciousness. They don't understand that observation itself can change outcomes. In another section of the facility, military strategists studied records from the crashed ship. The Empire had conquered thousands of civilizations, but they always followed the same pattern. They had never needed to adapt their tactics because they had never failed. "They're powerful," General Harrison said during the briefing, "but they're predictable. They expect us to either surrender or try to fight them conventionally. Their AIs can't process the concept of psychological warfare." Teams worked around the clock, combining the knowledge from the crashed ship with humanity's unique understanding of chaos theory and social dynamics. They discovered that Imperial eyes, for all their processing power, couldn't handle true randomness or emotional decisions. Dr. Martinez made a breakthrough on the 10th day. "Their quantum network is like a crystal," she explained to the assembled leaders. "Perfect, structured, unbreakable. But if you introduce the right kind of chaos, the whole thing begins to resonate in ways they never predicted." The facility became the coordination center for Operation Echo. Using insights from the crashed ship, Earth's scientists and hackers began to understand how to slip through the cracks in Imperial systems. Not through brute force, but through methods the Empire had never imagined possible. "They think quantum mechanics is just math," Dr. Martinez told her team as they prepared their counterstrike. "They don't understand that human consciousness can affect quantum states. We can make their perfect systems show them exactly what we want them to see." As the second week of the ultimatum began, humanity had its plan ready. They would not attack the Empire's ships or challenge their military might. Instead, they would do something the Empire had never faced in 10,000 years of conquest. They would make the Empire doubt itself. In his quarters aboard the flagship, Commander Tilax received another report showing everything proceeding according to predictions. The Empire's AIs still calculated a 99.9% chance of success, but for the first time in Imperial history, those calculations were about to be proven wrong. Operation Echo began with a whisper. In the early hours of the third week, Dr. Sarah Chen sat at her terminal, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Around her, teams of scientists and military personnel waited in tense silence. The Antarctic facility had been transformed into humanity's digital war room. "Remember," Dr. Martinez said from her station, "we're not trying to break their systems. We're making their systems tell our story." She nodded to General Harrison, who gave the final authorization. Sarah pressed enter, and humanity's counterattack began. But there were no missiles, no explosions, no traditional signs of war. Instead, they launched something far more powerful, a story. Using the quantum interference patterns they'd discovered, Earth's teams began feeding false information into the Empire's network. They started with something small, a fictional alien race that had supposedly fought the Empire centuries ago. The story appeared in the Empire's own historical databases, complete with fabricated battle records and detailed reports. "They're accepting the data," Sarah reported, watching as the Imperial systems automatically integrated the false information. "Their AIs are actually helping us by filling in the gaps, making our story fit their existing records." The next phase was bolder. They introduced records of another civilization, this one showing signs of unusual resistance to Imperial control. Again, The Empire's own systems helped spread the deception, their rigid logic unable to detect the subtle emotional manipulation humans had woven into the data. Commander Tilax received the first reports with confusion. "Our historical archives are showing anomalies," his science officer reported. "We're finding records of civilizations that successfully resisted us." In the Antarctic facility, Dr. Martinez watched the Empire's reaction through their quantum monitoring systems. "They can't process the idea that their records might be wrong," she explained to the others. "Their entire civilization is built on perfect information. We're introducing imperfection into their perfect system." The third wave of Operation Echo was the masterstroke. Earth's teams began inserting subtle references to a mysterious species, one that had supposedly developed the ability to manipulate Imperial technology through means the Empire couldn't understand. The references were fragmented, like pieces of a puzzle the Empire's AIs would feel compelled to solve. "Look at their search patterns," Sarah said excitedly. "Their systems are obsessed with our fictional species. They're searching their entire network for more information about them." The Empire's reaction was exactly what humanity had predicted. Their AIs, programmed to find patterns and maintain perfect records, began dedicating more and more resources to understanding these mysterious new entries in their database. The more they searched, the more breadcrumbs humanity left for them to find. "They're starting to see patterns that aren't there," Dr. Martinez observed. "Their own AIs are creating connections between our false data points, making the deception even more convincing than we could have managed on our own." In his command chamber, Tilax was growing increasingly disturbed. Reports were coming in from across the fleet. Historical inconsistencies, unexplained gaps in their records, and most troubling, evidence that perhaps the Empire wasn't as invincible as they had always believed. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "we're detecting unusual variations in our quantum network. The patterns, they're unlike anything we've seen before." Back in the facility, General Harrison watched the Empire's confusion with grim satisfaction. "They've never faced an enemy who fights with information instead of weapons," he said. "They don't understand that humans have been waging psychological warfare against each other for thousands of years. We're experts at it." As the third week of the ultimatum drew to a close, Operation Echo had achieved its first objective. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Empire was beginning to question its own infallibility. And this was just the beginning of humanity's plan. 20 days into the ultimatum, Earth was ready to deliver its real message. In the Antarctic facility, Dr. Martinez and her team had prepared what they called the package, a quantum-encrypted transmission that would bypass all Imperial defenses because it used their own communication protocols. "Are we sure about this?" Sarah Chen asked, looking at the gathered world leaders on the massive screen above them. "Once we send this, there's no going back." President Garcia spoke for the assembled leaders. "We're sure. They gave us their ultimatum. Now we give them ours." The package contained something the Empire had never seen before, the true history of human warfare. Not just the victories, but the defeats, the adaptations, the endless creativity humans had shown in conflict. From ancient battles to modern cyber warfare, from guerrilla tactics to economic warfare, everything that made human conflict unique. "Sending now," Dr. Martinez announced. She pressed the button, and humanity's message began its journey to the Imperial flagship. Commander Tilax was in the middle of another troubling briefing when the transmission arrived. His officers had been reporting increasing anomalies in their systems, strange patterns they couldn't explain, and growing unrest among the crew. The message interrupted everything, taking over their main viewing screen. The transmission began with scenes from Earth's ancient history. The Empire watched in confusion as smaller armies defeated larger ones through cunning. They saw how humans turned defeat into victory, learned from their failures, and adapted their strategies continuously. "Sir," Tilax's cultural officer reported, "these creatures, they fight differently. They don't follow any logical pattern. When defeated, they don't submit. They changed their entire way of thinking. The transmission showed the Empire how humans had developed biological warfare before they understood biology, psychological warfare before they studied psychology, and social warfare before they had sociology. It showed how humans could unite against a common threat while simultaneously fighting among themselves, a concept that the Imperial AIs found impossible to process. In the Antarctic facility, they watched the Empire's reaction through their quantum monitoring systems. They're trying to analyze it, Sarah reported. Their AIs are attempting to find patterns, predict outcomes, but they can't. Human warfare is too chaotic for their systems to process. The transmission concluded with Earth's response to the Empire's ultimatum. It was just a few simple sentences, but they contained a warning unlike any the Empire had received in its 10,000 years of conquest. We are humanity. We have spent our entire history learning how to defeat superior forces. We don't need to match your technology. We don't need to overpower your weapons. We have already begun to change you in ways you cannot detect. This is your only warning. Leave or discover why every human victory in our history began with a defeat. In his command chamber, Tlax felt something he had never experienced before: doubt. His tactical displays showed their overwhelming military superiority. Their weapons could devastate the planet. Their shields were impenetrable. Yet somehow, these primitives were not afraid. "Sir," his science officer interrupted, "we're detecting more anomalies in our network. The patterns, they're spreading. And our crew, they're asking questions we've never heard before." Dr. Martinez watched the Imperial ships through their quantum monitors. "Look," she pointed to the data streams. "Their perfect system is starting to fracture. Not from our attacks, but from the seeds of doubt we've planted. Their own fears are doing more damage than any weapon could." In the Empire's 10,000 years of conquest, they had never encountered a species that fought back like this, not with weapons or technology, but by introducing chaos into their order, doubt into their certainty, and imagination into their logic. For the first time, the Empire faced an enemy they couldn't understand, and that made humanity more dangerous than any military force they had ever encountered. The effects of Earth's message rippled through the Imperial fleet like waves in a perfect crystal, creating cracks no one could see but everyone could feel. In his private quarters, Commander Tlax reviewed the reports from his ships with growing concern. "Sir," his first officer reported through the comm system, "we're having unusual problems with the crew. They're asking questions. Questions. The Empire had faced resistance before, fought wars against advanced civilizations, but they had never faced an enemy that made their own people question their basic beliefs." Tlax opened his personal console and found even more disturbing news. In the Antarctic facility, Sarah Chen tracked the spread of their influence through the Imperial network. "It's working better than we expected," she told Dr. Martinez. "Their crew members are accessing our historical databases. They're studying human history on their own now. The Empire's perfect hierarchical structure was experiencing something entirely new. Junior officers were requesting explanations for orders, something that had never happened before. Crew members were discussing human concepts like asymmetric warfare and adaptive strategy. Their AI systems are in chaos," Dr. Martinez reported to the world leaders. "They're detecting hundreds of potential threats that don't exist because we've taught them to see patterns in randomness. They're becoming paranoid." Tlax called an emergency meeting of his command staff. As they gathered in the crystalline briefing room, he noticed something different in their eyes. Uncertainty. The humans had somehow infected his crew with the most dangerous virus of all: doubt. "Our quantum networks are showing increasing instability," his science officer reported. "We're detecting infiltrations, but when we investigate, we find nothing. Yet our systems insist the threats are real." In truth, there were no infiltrations. Humanity had simply taught the Empire's AI to doubt its own data. The perfect machine logic that had served them for 10,000 years was now working against them. Sarah noticed something interesting in the data streams. "Look at this," she called to her team. They're starting to exhibit human behaviors. Their crews are forming unofficial information networks, sharing doubts, asking questions their hierarchy never prepared them for. The Empire's military discipline was legendary. Their crews were conditioned from birth to follow orders without question. But now they were learning about human concepts like resistance, revolution, and questioning authority. "Sir," Tulax's cultural officer spoke up during the briefing. "I've been studying their history. These humans, they've overthrown their own governments countless times. They fight against superior forces as a matter of course. They seem to thrive on it." Dr. Martinez watched through their quantum monitors as the Empire's command structure began to show subtle signs of strain. "They're experiencing cultural shock," she explained to General Harrison. "Their entire civilization is based on perfect order and unquestioning obedience. We've introduced something they have no defense against: free thinking." In the Imperial fleet, crew members began reporting strange dreams, something unprecedented in their history. They dreamed of resistance, of questioning, of change. The humans had introduced not just doubt, but imagination into their perfect, logical world. Tulax stood at his command window, watching the blue planet below. His tactical displays still showed their overwhelming military superiority. Their weapons could still easily destroy this primitive world. But for the first time in Imperial history, he wasn't sure if he could trust his own crew to follow those orders. "The humans," he muttered to himself, "they've changed us without firing a shot." In the Antarctic facility, Dr. Martinez smiled as she watched the Empire's perfect system continue to unravel. "They thought they could simply absorb us into their empire," she said to her team. "Instead, we're teaching them something they've never known in 10,000 years, how to question themselves." The Empire was learning, too late, that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't technology or military might. It was their ability to create change from within. On the 28th day of the ultimatum, Commander Tulax made a decision unprecedented in Imperial history. Standing in his command center, surrounded by officers who no longer showed the blind obedience he was accustomed to, he gave an order that would change the Empire forever. "Prepare for withdrawal," he announced. "All ships." In the Antarctic facility, Sarah Chen almost fell out of her chair when she saw the data. "They're powering down their weapons," she shouted. "All their ships, they're repositioning for departure." Dr. Martinez quickly confirmed the readings. After 10,000 years of unbroken conquest, the Empire was retreating. Not because they had been defeated in battle, but because humanity had achieved something far more significant. They had made the Empire defeat itself. "Sir, are you certain?" Tulax's first officer asked, his voice carrying a note of questioning that would have been unthinkable just weeks ago. "The High Command will demand an explanation." Tulax looked at his tactical displays one last time. His ship still had overwhelming power. His weapons could still reduce Earth's cities to ash. But his crew had changed. They had learned to think like humans, to question, to doubt. They could no longer be trusted to carry out a genocide without asking why. In the White House Situation Room, President Garcia received the news with quiet satisfaction. "They finally understood our message," she said to her advisors. "We didn't have to prove we could defeat them. We just had to prove we would never stop fighting them." Before departing, Tulax did something else unprecedented. He left a warning beacon in Earth's orbit, but not the usual type marking a dangerous or primitive world. This warning was different. Dr. Chen translated the beacon's message as it appeared on their screens. "This species does not follow known patterns. They do not fight conventionally. They change those who try to change them. For the safety of the Empire, no further contact is recommended." In his final report to the Imperial High Command, Tulax wrote words that would be studied for centuries. "We came to conquer their world, but they conquered our certainty. We came to change them, but they changed us. They defeated us without destroying anything except our belief in our own invincibility." The Imperial ships departed as quietly as they had arrived, their crystalline forms disappearing into hyperspace. They left behind not a conquered world, but a transformed empire. The crews who had experienced Earth would never be the same, carrying with them the dangerous human ideas of questioning, adaptation, and resistance. In the aftermath, Dr. Martinez held a final briefing in the Antarctic facility. We showed them something they had never seen before. She explained to the assembled leaders, not just how humans fight, but how we think. We showed them that true strength isn't in perfect order or overwhelming force. It's in the ability to adapt, to question, to change. Sarah Chen added her own observation. They've ruled for 10,000 years by being unchanging and perfect. We scared them by showing them that change is inevitable, that perfection is a weakness, and that questions are more powerful than answers. General Harrison summarized it best in his final report. The Empire came expecting to find primitive warriors they could easily defeat. Instead, they found teachers who showed them the flaws in their own perfection. Years later, Earth's victory would be studied across the galaxy, not as a military triumph, but as the moment when a young species proved that the ability to change was more powerful than the strongest weapons. Humanity had given the galaxy a new kind of weapon, the power of doubt. The Empire never returned to Earth, but their warning beacon remained, telling all who passed, "Here lives a species that wins not by being stronger, but by being impossible to predict." Here are the humans who taught the Empire that true power lies not in perfect order, but in the beautiful chaos of free will.